I'm going
His
to defer.
question.
Mr. Grijalva.
Mr. Grijalva is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, and good to see you again. The discussion on the proposed budget by the Biden administration is an investment on top of an investment, and it is a good strategy. But my question, Dr. Carmona, has to do with the Republican budget, or the illusion of a budget, which calls for a 22% cut, even on the 22 levels, based also on the premise that the military would not be touched at all. And I asked the question because I think it's important to contrast this investment budget that you are bringing before the committee today versus what is a budget that devastates Title I, devastates all the support and supplemental services, especially to our most vulnerable students. Speak to that point. Speak to the point, I think, as well, Mr. Secretary. There's a demographic shift going on in our public education system across the country. It's reflected in the area I represent. And not only the diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, but also poor kids being the bulk in some areas of who is attending public education. And why this investment is important to that transition that this country is going through in our public schools, and why these proposed cuts, how they devastate this, and why that cutting those programs at this time to those populations, what it means to our country going forward. Sir?
Thank you, Congressman Grijalva. And, you know, as a lifelong educator, I've been able to see how these federal dollars, help students who are most in need. You mentioned Title I. Students who are struggling to read, we have work to do in this country to get our students reading at the level they should be reading. There's no reason in this country we're not leading the world. Our plan is aimed at addressing the literacy and numeracy and the achievement of students in many other areas. So I've seen the impacts of Title I dollars, for example. I've seen the impact of the IDEA dollars for our students. And quite frankly, you're absolutely right. Cuts in these areas would negatively impact those students who need it most. For example, it would result in a 22% cut would result in approximately 60,000 teachers being cut from Title I dollars across the country. Our students cannot afford that. For students that are students with disabilities, I would argue these students have probably been impacted the most by the pandemic because they didn't have access to the small group setting, the one-to-one device support that they often receive. We would see a cut of 48,000 teachers under IDEA. It would have a negative impact on our entire country, but I think the impact will be most felt by those in greatest need.
And I have other questions having to do with Title I that you responded to, the 22% funding cut, questions about middle school and its importance in our system, American Indian and Alaska Native education, school librarians and the right to read, and as I think the mention of ideological and cultural issues being dominating the discussion around education and not the fundamental needs that it has and what we can supplement those needs with in terms of resources. You know, and I want to congratulate the Department of Education for continuing to protect the students' right to read and the parents' right to choose what they read, and not, you know, when you have over 2,500 books banned across libraries in this country, or attempts to ban those books, that's a frightening thought. And if we're talking about ideological grievance issues, one parent's rights are important and need to be protected, but the ability of children to have access to the best information, and for that to be empirical, and for that to be protected as a right, I think is also important. I want to congratulate your department for protecting that. And with that, I yield back, Mr.